He walked into class just 20 minutes late, and instead of a tardy slip, his teacher humiliated him with 2 impossible math problems. The whole room laughed, waiting for him to fail. But 10 minutes later, those same students were gasping in disbelief. What he wrote on the board didn't just silence the class, it shook the world. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning air still clung to a damp chill when Darius Coleman stepped off the city bus, his sneakers splashing against a shallow puddle near the curb. His backpack, worn at the edges from too many years of use, tugged heavy on his shoulders as he sprinted across the manicured lawns of Easton Ridge High, the kind of suburban school that gleamed with money his family had never known. He checked his phone. 8:50 a.m. 20 minutes late. His chest tightened. In Easton Ridge, lateness wasn't just about missing class. It was about reputation. And for Darius, one of the only black students in the advanced courses, every step into that building felt like stepping into a courtroom where his worth was already under trial. The bus delay wasn't his fault. A broken-down car on the highway had stalled traffic for half an hour. But excuses didn't travel far in this place, especially not from him. He imagined what Miss Halverson would say. The man didn't need reasons, only reminders that students like Darius weren't supposed to be there in the first place. Darius slipped through the double doors, a hum of fluorescent lights greeting him. The hallways were eerily empty, lockers sealed shut, the morning rush already dissolved into classrooms. His footsteps echoed louder than he wanted. He hated being noticed. He hated even more when his skin color made that notice unavoidable. When he pushed open the door to room 214, the creak seemed to drag the entire class's eyes onto him. 30 heads turned, some smirking, some rolling their eyes. A row of students near the window snickered, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. At the front of the room, Mr. Halverson paused mid-sentence. He was a tall man with a rigid posture, his thinning blonde hair combed neatly to one side, glasses perched low on his nose. His expression, however, carried none of the warmth of a seasoned teacher. Instead, it froze into a thin-lipped smile, the kind that didn't welcome but warned. "Well," Halverson said, voice sharp and cutting, "if it isn't our star mathematician, gracing us with his presence." 20 minutes late. Laughter bubbled in the room, restrained but poisonous. Darius lowered his gaze, heading toward his desk in the back. He thought maybe, just maybe, if he kept his head down, he could escape with a mark in the attendance sheet, and nothing more. But Mr. Halverson didn't let go that easily. "Not so fast, Mr. Coleman," he barked. "You don't just stroll into my classroom late and expect to sit down like nothing happened." Darius froze. His stomach tightened. He turned slowly, aware of every eye tracking his movements. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "The bus was—" "Oh, I'm sure the bus was to blame," Halverson interrupted, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "The bus, the traffic, the weather, maybe even the alignment of the planets. Always something else, isn't it?" More laughter. Some students shook their heads, some stared at him with pity. The humiliation stung deeper than he wanted to admit. Halverson strode to the chalkboard and began writing with deliberate strokes. The squeak of chalk echoed as he scrawled 2 large equations across the board, each line twisting into numbers and symbols so complex that even the honor students frowned in confusion. "These," Halverson announced, stepping aside with theatrical flair, "are 2 math problems no one in this class has managed to solve. Consider them your punishment, Mr. Coleman. If you want to stay in my classroom, prove you deserve the seat." The room fell into a hush. Even those who laughed grew quiet, waiting to see the spectacle. Darius's mouth went dry. His heart hammered. This wasn't just about tardiness. Everyone could see it. Halverson wasn't interested in discipline. He wanted a public lesson, a reminder of who belonged and who didn't. One boy whispered loud enough to carry, "Bet he can't even start it." A girl near the front stifled a laugh. "He'll probably guess and fail." The words pressed against Darius like weights. He remembered every time someone doubted him, every time teachers had told him to focus on sports instead of academics, every sideways glance when he raised his hand in class. Halverson folded his arms. "Well, Mr. Coleman, or should I send you to the office and remove you from this class entirely?" For a moment, Darius wanted to disappear, to let the shame swallow him whole, to walk out and never look back. But something inside him shifted, a stubborn spark that had carried him through years of being underestimated. He walked toward the board slowly, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. The laughter resumed, soft but steady, building like an undercurrent. Every step felt like he was walking into an execution chamber. Standing in front of the chalkboard, Darius stared at the maze of numbers. They stretched across the board like walls closing in on him. But as he studied them, lines of logic began to surface in his mind. Not clear solutions, not yet, but familiar shapes, patterns he had played with in the quiet of his room, nights spent with borrowed textbooks and notebooks filled with scribbles. Behind him, whispers grew louder. Some students leaned forward in anticipation, ready to watch him stumble. Others leaned back, crossing their arms, expecting failure. Halverson smirked. Already satisfied. Go on then, he said. Show us what you've got. Darius gripped the chalk. His hand trembled at first, but then steadied. The room fell quiet, the laughter dimming into an uneasy silence. The squeak of chalk against board filled the air as he began to write, not randomly, not desperately, but with precision. Every mark carried intention. Every step was deliberate. The class leaned in, confusion spreading across their faces as they realized he wasn't floundering. He was building. Whispers cut through the silence. Wait, is he actually? Halverson's smirk faltered slightly, though his arms remained crossed. He looked on, eyes narrowing as though the very possibility disturbed him. Darius didn't turn. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. His focus locked onto the problem, his mind unfolding layers of logic the way others unfolded sentences in a book. The clock ticked above the door. Every second felt stretched thin. And then, just as the room grew restless again, Darius paused, lowering the chalk for the briefest moment. He stared at the board, his eyes sharp, intense, eyes that no longer looked like those of a boy being punished, but of someone who had seen through the game entirely. The class fell into absolute silence. And then, without warning, half the room erupted into laughter again. Certain he had stalled. But the laughter didn't match what his eyes carried. His silence wasn't hesitation. It was something else. Something no one, not even Mr. Halverson, had expected. Darius turned back to the board, staring at the equations not with fear but with a steady, unshakable fire that made the room fall quiet once more. His eyes told a different story. This wasn't going to end the way they thought. The chalk still pressed against his fingertips, leaving a fine white dust that clung stubbornly to his skin. Darius didn't move yet. His shoulders stiffened as he felt the weight of 30 pairs of eyes locked on him. He had walked into the class 20 minutes late, and instead of a tardy slip, he now stood at the center of a spectacle orchestrated to humiliate him. Silence carried across the room, broken only by the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. For a moment, he could almost forget where he was. Almost. But the truth was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a test of math. It was a test of identity. At Easton Ridge High, a school where polished hallways gleamed and football trophies lined the main lobby, black students were visible, but only in carefully contained roles. They ran down the field on Friday nights, leaping for touchdowns while the crowd roared their approval. They sprinted on the track, jerseys drenched in sweat, medals pinned to their chests. They provided the spectacle of athletic greatness. But in the classrooms, especially the advanced ones, they were ghosts. Rare, out of place, an exception always waiting to be questioned. Darius knew it better than anyone. He wasn't the wide receiver. He wasn't the sprinter. He wasn't the stereotype that teachers nodded approvingly at when scholarships rolled in for sports. He was the quiet kid in the back of the room, the one who read through problem sets for fun, the one who solved puzzles in his worn notebooks while others swapped answers to homework. He was the student no one expected, and because of that, he was the one no one wanted to see succeed. The first time he felt the sting of it was in 7th grade. He remembered the scene with sharp clarity, the day the advanced math teacher had asked the class to form groups for a project. Darius had approached 3 white boys, offering to join. They looked at him, then one snorted, "You should try the gym, not the calculator." The laughter that followed was casual, cruel, and unforgettable. By the end of that year, the teacher had quietly recommended that Darius be placed in standard math classes the next fall. He hadn't failed a test. He hadn't fallen behind. But the teacher's explanation to his mother still echoed in his mind. He's bright, but these advanced tracks demand a certain kind of discipline. Kids like him often do better when the pace isn't so intense. Kids like him. That phrase had followed him like a shadow. Even now, standing at the chalkboard in Halverson's class, Darius could hear it. Echoes of dismissive voices that had told him over and over what his place was supposed to be. He remembered the counselor in ninth grade, smiling tightly as she handed him a pamphlet. Vocational programs might suit you better than chasing unrealistic dreams. MIT. Kids like you don't make it that far. Those words had burned a scar deep inside him, one he carried into every classroom. Behind him, whispers stirred again. The students weren't waiting for brilliance. They were waiting for confirmation. Confirmation that the unspoken rules of Easton Ridge were intact, that the black kid wasn't meant to stand in front of the room, solving equations. He was meant to sit quietly, or run the ball down the field. Darius tightened his grip on the chalk. His mind raced, not just through numbers but through memories of every barrier placed in his path. His father had left when he was 5, and his mother worked 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. Nights at home weren't filled with tutors or quiet study sessions. They were filled with the sound of her typing invoices in the kitchen, her face weary under the dim light. Yet somehow she still asked him about his homework, still encouraged him, still told him you're more than what they say you are. That memory steadied him. Coleman. Halverson's voice cut across the silence, sharp, impatient. If you can't do it, sit down. Don't waste our time. The class chuckled again. Darius swallowed, turned back to the board, and began scribbling. At first his hand trembled, each stroke uncertain. But as numbers met symbols, and symbols connected into sequences, a rhythm emerged. The front row students leaned forward, their eyes narrowing, trying to follow his steps. What looked random at first quickly revealed itself as deliberate. His logic wasn't chaotic, it was layered. One boy muttered, "Wait, he's actually doing it." A girl beside him frowned, whispering back, "No way, he's just writing nonsense." But it wasn't nonsense. Darius's notes curved into solutions, small threads weaving together into something coherent. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicked. He was working with the same quiet focus he carried at home, late at night, when no one was there to laugh or interrupt. His brain didn't see the problem the way others did. Where they saw walls, he saw doors. Where they saw impossibility, he saw challenge. And yet beneath the confidence that began to grow in his chest, a heavier truth pressed down on him. He wasn't just solving a math problem. He was dismantling a stereotype in real time, before an audience waiting to witness either his collapse or his defiance. Every number he wrote was a rebellion. Every symbol was a refusal. Mr. Halverson's smirk faltered again. His arms loosened from their tight cross against his chest, his face tightening as though he'd swallowed something sour. The room's energy shifted. The laughter waned. Whispers grew sharper. The spectacle was no longer certain. In that fragile silence, Darius remembered again the counselor's words. "Kids like you don't make it to MIT." And in that moment, with the chalk dust clinging to his hand, with 30 eyes pressing on his back, with the weight of generations of dismissal thick in the air, he thought, what if I did? What if I showed them right now that everything they believed was a lie? The determination surged. His lines grew bolder, his writing faster. A sharp gasp escaped from the front row as one girl suddenly understood the pattern he was building. She leaned toward her neighbor, whispering fiercely, He's solving it." The boy shook his head, but his eyes betrayed doubt. At the back of the room, Kayla Myers, who had been silent all morning, pulled out her phone beneath the desk, angling it toward the board. She wasn't sure why she hit record. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was because deep down, she sensed she was watching something that would matter far beyond this classroom. Darius didn't notice her. He was lost in the numbers, his notebook now open on the desk beside him, scribbles flying across the page as he worked faster than even he expected. The silence cracked again with whispers. "Wait, look at that. He's not guessing. He actually knows what he's doing." And then, as the class strained to follow his steps, Darius did something none of them anticipated. He set the chalk down for a moment and bent over his notebook, sketching out an alternate path to the solution, refining his logic. His pencil flew, page after page, filling with calculation. The front row leaned closer, wide-eyed. What they saw wasn't failure. It wasn't desperation. It was brilliance unfolding in real time, the kind no one in that room had been prepared to witness. As the clock ticked louder in the silence, Darius's hand stilled. He lifted his head slowly, his notebook half filled with numbers. And for the first time, the students in the front row saw it, the glimmer of certainty in his eyes. He wasn't just attempting the problem, he was on the edge of solving it. The faint confidence that had flickered in Darius's eyes, unsettled the room, like a draft sneaking under a locked door. It wasn't the look of someone scrambling for a miracle. It was focus, precise and unsettling. Miss Halverson sensed it too, and stepped into the aisle as if to physically reclaim control. "Class," Halverson announced, projecting the authority of a referee who never gets questioned. "For those who are confused about what's happening, let me be crystal clear." He tapped the board with the wooden end of the chalk. "These two problems are designed to be unsolvable in class time. We use them in math club to stretch our strongest seniors. They require patience, discipline, and most importantly, punctuality." A soft ripple of laughter rolled across the seats. The punchline wasn't subtle. Darius kept his eyes on the board. He had learned that looking anywhere else gave people permission to read weakness where there was none. He wrote a small heading in the corner of his notebook. "Assumptions?" Then returned to the first problem. The variables arranged themselves like furniture he'd moved 100 times. Every step had a purpose, even if no one else could see it yet. Halverson folded his arms. "Mr. Coleman, understand this is not punishment for punishment's sake. Consider it a lesson in consequences," he said, emphasizing the last word with a thin smile. "If you believed you could waltz in here 20 minutes late and simply blend into the back row, you believed wrong." From the window row, someone murmured, "He's not blending into anything." Another voice, lower, amused, added, "He'll crash and burn in 5 minutes." Kayla, still recording without quite knowing why, felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't sure if it was secondhand embarrassment or a different kind of shame, one that came from recognizing something ugly and knowing she'd never had the courage to name it. "Eyes up front," Halverson said sharply, and every phone snapped face down. "We are not gawking. We are learning. You will watch Mr. Coleman attempt what he's not prepared for, and you'll see exactly why preparation matters." Preparation. The word dug into Darius like a hook. He had prepared in ways Halverson would never see. He'd prepared in laundromats with textbooks balanced on a humming dryer. He'd prepared with second-hand problem sets printed in faded ink. He'd prepared when buses ran late, and kitchens were too loud and nobody thought he belonged in rooms like this. He drew a boundary around one term, and whispered, almost to himself, "If in is odd." "What was that?" Halverson demanded. Darius kept writing, "I'm testing cases." Halverson's mouth twitched. Testing cases is what people do when they don't have a plan. The class chuckled. Darius exhaled slowly, refusing the bait. Easton Ridge liked to pretend it was a meritocracy. Shiny banners in the lobby, framed Ivy League letters in the counselor's office. But in hallways and faculty lounges, rules bent in invisible ways. Black students got celebrated on Friday nights. They did not get credited for nuance on a Tuesday morning. The unspoken hierarchy was simple. Run fast, jump high, and stay out of the advanced lanes. People applauded your body. They distrusted your mind. "Let's talk time," Halverson said, glancing at the analog clock above the door. "We have 30 minutes left in class. Mr. Coleman, you may continue for 10. If there's no demonstrable progress, we move on." A boy in the front row, Trent, captain of the math team, leaned back and smirked. "Generous," he said under his breath. Darius circled a series of expressions, then lowered his chalk and opened his notebook wider. He sketched a quick roadmap in graphite, arrows, substitutions, a hint of symmetry that might collapse the problem if he handled it right. He could feel the room's expectation pressing hard against his spine. It wanted him to fumble. It wanted him to confirm the story it already told about him. Halverson paced. "For context," he said to the room, "these are classic problems. Elegant. They require not just knowledge, but character." He let the word hang, heavy and insinuating. Character looks like showing up on time. Character looks like humility. Character looks like knowing when you're out of your depth. Darius felt his jaw tense. "I'm not out of my depth," he said quietly. "What was that?" Halverson's eyebrows rose. "I said, I'm not out of my depth." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He made another mark on the board. "You miscopied a coefficient." The class stilled. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum less. Halverson laughed once, disbelieving. "Excuse me?" Darius pointed to a term near the left edge. "This constant. If it's even, the structure collapses and the constraints contradict each other in the domain you've set. There's no solution under that condition. But if the constant is odd..." He trailed off and wrote a quick contradiction proof in the margin, small and tight like a secret. Trent's smirk dropped half an inch. "That's a convenient excuse," Halverson said, crossing to the board. You're saying you can't solve it because I made it impossible as written. I'm saying it's impossible as written, Darius replied, voice steady. And solvable if the coefficient is corrected. A soft O moved through the front row, like wind over grass. Kayla's hand, hidden under the desk, kept her phone angled toward the board. She didn't know whether to breathe. Trent glanced at the problem, then at Halverson. That looks like a contradiction, he muttered. Halverson's smile thinned. If I wanted a chorus of armchair critics, I'd assign theater. He rapped the board with his knuckles. Proceed with the problem as stated. Darius studied him for a heartbeat. He'd seen this dynamic before, an adult's authority welded to pride. Correctness didn't matter if the correction came from the wrong mouth. He turned back to the chalk and chose a different path. Then I'll show both, he said. The impossibility, under your coefficient, and the solution under the corrected one. A few students snickered. One whispered, he thinks he's special. But Darius had already moved. He wrote an impossibility proof with quick decisive marks, laying out the contradiction like a breadcrumb trail, each step inevitable from the last. Trent leaned forward despite himself trying to outrun the logic and failing. Stop grandstanding, Halverson snapped. This class is not your stage. It's math, Darius said, more to the board than to the man behind him. It doesn't care who's holding the chalk. Something pinched in Halverson's expression, a small flash that looked like offense dressed as order. He turned to the class. You see? This is what happens when rules don't matter. You get improvisation. You get excuses. You get evidence, Kayla blurted, then flushed when a dozen heads swiveled toward her. I mean, look at the steps. Halverson's gaze pinned her. Ms. Myers, do you have something to add? Her voice shrank. Just that he's not making it up. The teacher inhaled through his nose and exhaled patience like a practiced performance. We will not be derailed by side commentary. He pointed at the clock. 8 minutes left, Mr. Coleman. Demonstrate progress or return to your seat. Darius didn't ask for more time. He didn't argue. He shifted from the impossibility proof to the corrected variant, with a calm that felt like defiance by another name. Chalk dust rose and fell around his fingers. The room, once delighted by the prospect of a public failure, recalibrated into something tenser, spectator sport becoming tribunal. He remembered the counselor's words, kids like you don't make it to MIT, and felt the old sting mix with a cleaner, newer heat. He wasn't here to audition for their approval. He was here because the truth of a thing shouldn't depend on who speaks it. You're stalling, someone muttered from the back. Watch him, Trent said without looking away. He's not stalling. Halverson bristled. Mr. Barrow, I'll handle the assessments. Darius's handwriting sharpened. He introduced a substitution that thinned the problem's tangle into something manageable, then set a boundary condition that locked a troublesome term into cooperation. He had seen a cousin of this structure once, in an old contest packet he found in a community center drawer. He'd memorized the feeling of it, the way the edges softened when you pressed in just the right place. 5 minutes, Halverson said. A bead of sweat tracked down Darius's temple. He wasn't rushing made your hands lie. He wrote a clean implication. Then another. The class fell into a hushed, anticipatory quiet. Kayla's phone trembled in her grip. She lowered it, then lifted it again, unsure which choice would feel more like betrayal later. Mr. Coleman, Halverson said, voice low now, this exercise is not about humiliating you. It is about maintaining standards. I don't move the goalposts for anyone. Darius paused, chalk hovering. You didn't move the goalposts, he said without turning. You moved the field. A few students sucked in breaths. The line wasn't loud, but it landed. Halverson's lips pressed into a pale line. That's enough. But Darius had already pivoted to the final hinge, an identity that would either lock the entire structure or split it apart in his hands. He could feel the solution breathing at the edge of the board, patient and inevitable. He wrote one more line, then stepped back a fraction, measuring the symmetry like a mechanic listening to an engine's hum. Trent whispered, "Holy language," Halverson barked automatically. But his eyes were glued to the chalk. The spectacle the teacher intended had transformed. It was still a show, but not the kind that comforted the audience. For some students, the room grew uncomfortable in a new way. It asked them to revise themselves. Others slipped into the old defenses. He got lucky. He cheated. He rehearsed, and clung to them like life rafts. A soft knock sounded at the door. The assistant principal, Miss Delaney, opened it a few inches, and peered in. "Everything all right?" she asked, scanning the stillness. It's awfully quiet for second period. We're fine, Halverson said tightly, not taking his eyes off the board. We're in the middle of a lesson. Miss Delaney lingered, then withdrew. The door clicked shut. 2 minutes, Halverson said, and pretended it didn't sound like a plea. Darius pressed the chalk to the board again. He drew a neat boundary around his last step and wrote, in small letters, therefore. He stopped short of the final stroke. Not yet. He wanted the chain to be unbreakable before he set the last link. What's he waiting for? Someone breathed. Courage, another muttered, and got a few nervous snickers. But the front row saw something else. Not hesitation, but inspection. He was checking the structure like a bridge builder, testing a load. Kayla realized her hands had gone still. She wasn't recording. She was watching. Time, Halverson said, the second hand ticking onto the 12. Darius didn't move. There's one more identity, he said softly. You miscopied it there too. The class jolted. Even Trent turned to the teacher, startled. Where? Darius tapped a squared term on the second problem. The one he hadn't even started. That exponent. If it's squared, the behavior traps the function. If it's linear, the path opens. That's enough, Halverson said, color climbing into his cheeks. Return to your seat. Darius set the chalk down, then picked up a fresh piece. He felt the old fear rise. Don't push. Don't talk back. Don't risk it. But something steadier rose with it. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't challenging the man. He was correcting the math. I'll finish the first, he said. Then I'll show you why the second, as written, can't be resolved in this window. Sit down, Halverson repeated, harder. Darius's hand moved. The clock ticked, loud as a metronome, in the hush. Chalk skated, dust lifted, breaths held. Mr. Halverson's command hovered unanswered in the air, and the room felt the fulcrum shift under its desks, the balance between power and proof tilting grain by grain. The second hand swept past the 12, and with every tick Darius kept writing. The second hand kept carving circles, and the room learned the shape of its own breath. With each soft scrape of chalk, whispers slithered between desks, thin, nervous sounds that pretended to be jokes. Darius didn't look back. He wrote cleanly, almost economically, as though noise were merely weather outside a closed window. The board began to carry his reasoning like a current. Line after line, the messiness of panic absent. Around him, the room adjusted, some students leaning in, others folding their arms tighter. He's stalling, a boy near the window said, too loudly to be only to himself. He's annotating, Trent muttered, not taking his eyes off the board. There's a difference. A cluster of girls traded glances that flickered between amusement and pity. It's sad, one whispered, like watching a kid trip in a marathon. The metaphor felt prepackaged, the kind of line that earned nods without asking for thought. Darius heard none of it. He tuned the room out of his muscles. In his notebook, he had already sketched the skeleton. On the board he was setting cartilage to bone. From the back row, Kayla Myers stared through a guilt she couldn't quite name. She had seen this dance before. The soft setups that weren't soft at all. The way the bar got raised only when certain hands reached for it. She admired Darius from afar. His quiet that never gave anyone a target. The way he moved around hallways like he knew they were not built for him, and decided to use them anyway. Admiration had never become intervention. She knew why. It was easier to like a person than to risk becoming their echo. He's going nowhere, someone said behind her. Kayla flinched and lowered her phone as if it were contraband. She had been recording in fits, ashamed of the impulse and unwilling to stop. On the screen the video caught tiny motes of chalk dust floating in the projector beam. Like the room was full of a secret only the dust understood. Outside the window the flag hardly moved. Everything heavy happened inside. Up front, Halverson's stance had gone statue still, arms crossed, chin lifted, a posture rehearsed into second nature. This is what happens when we reward lateness, he said lightly, as though sharing a proverb. The unprepared spend minutes pretending to think. Darius paused and circled a term, his voice softer than the room wanted. It's not pretending. The class tittered, half laughter, half relief. The silence had been too tight. Kayla's eyes fell to Halverson's desk. Beside a stack of graded quizzes lay a stapled packet, its title page folded back. The font was familiar from math team flyers. Cumberland Invitational. Problem set A. She felt something slide into place in her mind. Her older brother Luke had competed at Cumberland last year. His handouts still sat on a shelf at home. The top margin here wore a neat red pen note, Coef, adjusted for class. Adjusted. Her stomach pitched. She leaned further, pretending to reach for a pencil. The second page showed the very first problem. The coefficient Darius had flagged, changed from odd to even in a tidy edit. She snapped her gaze to the board. He hadn't guessed. He had recognized the trap. "Hey," whispered the girl beside her. "You're really into this." Kayla's voice came out thinner than she meant. "I've seen this problem set. So, it's not written like that." Across the aisle, Trent's eyes made a quick calculation of Kayla's face. "The packet, the board. Are you sure?" Kayla nodded once. "Positive." Trent's mouth tightened. He didn't turn to Halverson. He turned to the math. "Then he's right," he murmured. The words felt dangerous in the air, like striking a match in a room that pretended not to smell gas. Near the door, giggles broke out again, an anxious release masquerading as mockery. "He's drawing shapes," a boy said. "What is that even art class?" "Like he'll finish anything," another added. "I've seen group projects move faster." The laughter prickled. It never thundered, never owned itself. It dripped, insidious and deniable. Darius had learned to separate what could harm him from what could haunt him. He let the drip roll off. He placed a substitution with 2 slow strokes, changed variables like changing the key of a song. The expression thinned. The second term softened. He felt the equation begin to breathe. 3 minutes, Halverson announced, as if time were a verdict he delivered. "Then watch," Darius said, almost conversational, and drew a boundary around a stubborn remainder. The room leaned physically, involuntarily, toward him.
Kayla's hands were damp.
She slid her phone back up and hit record a second time. She zoomed in on the board, then on the packet by the desk, then back to Darius's shoulder blades under his hoodie. He carried his body like someone who was used to making himself smaller, and had finally remembered how to take up exactly the right amount of space. The door creaked. Principal Behringer poked his head in, the kind smile he offered at assemblies nowhere on his face. Now, he surveyed the class, 29 students, riveted and one teacher trying not to look rattled, and let a chuckle sit on his lips like a coin. "Everything okay here?" he asked, tone already knowing. "Fine, Principal," Halverson said smoothly. "We're doing a little live demonstration on the cost of tardiness." Behringer's glance slid to Darius the way oil slides across water, touching without mixing. "Make sure the lesson lands," he said, and the corners of his mouth twitched into something like a smirk. He left the door ajar, as if the hallway needed to hear what correctness sounded like. A boy near the middle row whispered. The principal came to watch him fail. Kayla answered before she thought, or to pretend he didn't. The girl beside her hissed, "You'll get in trouble." Trouble already had a seat in the room. It had been sitting there since Darius opened the door. "Minute and a half," Halverson said. He checked his watch in a ritual flourish that felt more theatrical than necessary. "Mr. Coleman, seat." Now, Darius didn't sit. He made a small correction to his previous line, then drew an arrow that threaded 3 prior steps into a sudden alignment. Trent exhaled a quiet "oh," not dramatic, not loud, just recognition, the kind that an honest brain gives despite itself. "Explain the arrow," Halverson demanded, crossing toward the board. Darius didn't flinch. "It's the pivot," he said. "You can either force symmetry too early and get trapped, or you wait, and here, let it fold itself." He wrote 2 more lines, not rushing, as if he had all the time in a world that had never given him much. Behringer peered farther in through the crack. The smirk remained, as if his face were reluctant to learn new expressions. The giggles had disappeared. In their place sat a tight, charged quiet. Students who'd worn entertainment on their faces now wore calculation. Others who had moved so easily through rooms where they always belonged felt a wobble they tried to name as boredom. Kayla felt none of that. She felt the ground shifting toward a truth that would be inconvenient for adults who carried correction like a brand. 30 seconds, Halverson said. It was supposed to sound like control. It sounded like hope. "Then count them," Darius replied, almost gently. He set the chalk down, switched to the smaller nub near the tray, and tightened his writing. Kayla could hear the tiny sound of it, like ice skates on fresh winter. He closed the loop on the identity, substitute back, cancel, isolate. Even those who didn't understand every move understood that a path had opened where a wall had been. "This is ridiculous," someone muttered near the back. He can," Trent said. The principal's brows made a brief, surprised bridge. He didn't intervene. He waited for the narrative. He walked in, expecting. Darius stepped back exactly one pace. His chest rose once, slow. The room held its lungs like it might scare the math away if it breathed. He underlined the final expression. Then, beneath it, wrote the simplest thing on the board, all period. QED. A sharp inhale rolled across the front row. Shock. Then the sound of comprehension knocking on the door of disbelief. Kayla's camera caught the moment in a glitter of dust and certainty. The board filled, the line straight, the proof coherent. She looked at the clock, then at her screen's timestamp. 9 minutes and 34 seconds since Halverson had announced the 10-minute mercy. Under the smirk of a principal who had come to witness a cautionary tale. Under a coefficient altered by a teacher who would call the edit context. Under the press of a room trained to watch a black boy fail politely. Darius finished first. Halverson began. Voice caught between chastising and confusion. Darius didn't answer him. He looked at the second problem, then back at the pack of papers on the desk, then only once at Kayla, whose phone shook with adrenaline. "Do you want me to correct the second coefficient?" he asked quietly, "or should I show the contradiction first?" Kayla felt the words lodge in the room like a nail. The principal's smirk faltered. Trent's pencil snapped between his fingers with a soft, stunned crack. Somewhere near the windows, someone whispered, "No way." The hallway noise swelled faintly and receded, as if the school itself paused to listen. The class gasped as they checked the clock and realized it. He had solved the first equation in under 10 minutes, and his chalk was already rising toward the second. The board was full, the white chalk dust clinging to its surface like a storm frozen mid-motion. Darius had written his final line with a precision that left no room for ambiguity, the neat QED underlining his work like a quiet trumpet blast. For a moment, silence ruled. The class didn't breathe. The room itself seemed suspended between disbelief and awe. Then, as if rehearsed, Halverson stepped forward. His smirk had returned. Thin, stretched, and brittle. "Well," he said, voice dipped in mock approval, "that's quite the effort, Mr. Coleman." He tapped the board with his knuckle. "But let's be clear, neat handwriting does not equal understanding. This," he gestured broadly, as though sweeping Darius's work into the trash, "could just as easily be copied. Students sometimes memorize things they don't truly grasp." A low murmur rose across the room. The accusation wasn't subtle. It wasn't even cloaked. It was the oldest dismissal in the book. "You didn't create this, you just mimicked it." Darius's hand, still dusted with chalk, tightened around the stub. He didn't flinch or argue. He simply turned back to the board, uncapped the silence again, and began walking through each line out loud. His voice was calm, almost flat, but each word carried the weight of precision. "Here," he said, pointing to the substitution, "is where the original coefficient collapses. I noted it first. From there I tested parity cases, odd and even, to determine whether a solution set exists. Under the even assumption, the contradiction is immediate, but he tapped the adjusted coefficient. Under the odd condition, continuity remains possible. That's why I shifted paths here." The students leaned in, following the breadcrumbs. He moved from step to step without hesitation, as though he had built the problem in his head long before chalk ever touched board. Trent, who had folded his arms like a skeptic at a magic show, now leaned forward. "He's right," he whispered, almost involuntarily. Halverson stiffened. "Trent, if you don't mind, I'll be the one assessing here." But Darius didn't pause. He was deep into the architecture now, showing each progression like a builder walking someone through a house. "When you expand here, you see the cancellation. That's the pivot line. Once you anchor that, the symmetry resolves, and everything collapses cleanly into this identity." He tapped his final expression with the chalk, then stepped back. "It holds. Every step has justification." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief anymore. It was something sharper: recognition. The giggles were gone. The pity had evaporated. The room now carried the uneasy quiet of people, realizing they'd misjudged, and not in a small way. Halverson adjusted his glasses. His smirk had faltered, though he tried to force it back. "Convenient," he said. "Very convenient. But Mr. Coleman, it's easy enough to recite steps you've seen before. These are classic problems in certain circles. I suspect you may have stumbled on a solution online, memorized it, and regurgitated it here." Kayla's stomach twisted. She almost raised her hand, almost spoke the truth about the adjusted packet on his desk, but the weight of 30 eyes froze her. She glanced at her phone instead, still recording. Darius's eyes flickered, just once to the packet Halverson had left in plain sight. He recognized it now, the Cumberland set, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. His work was evidence enough. Instead, he did something the class didn't expect. He erased part of his own solution. Gasps fluttered across the room. "What are you doing?" Halverson demanded. "I'll do it again," Darius said simply. "A different path. No memorization. No regurgitation. Just logic." And he began from scratch. He didn't even consult his notebook this time. His hand moved fluidly, differently, taking an alternate substitution route. His second proof unfolded like a parallel universe. New choices, same destination. Within minutes, the board bloomed again with reasoning, each step locking into the next. Trent's mouth fell open. He's literally proving it two different ways. One girl whispered, "That's not copying." Kayla kept filming, her chest tight. She knew this moment mattered, not just for Darius, but for every black student she had seen underestimated in Easton Ridge's halls. Halverson's color rose. His smirk had cracked entirely, replaced with a tight jaw. He tried again to claw back control. "This is irrelevant. Time-wasting. The class has better uses than watching theatrics." But no one moved. No one looked away. The theater, if that's what he wanted to call it, was more riveting than any lecture Halverson had ever given. Finally, Darius stepped back again, the second route ending at the same flawless result. His chest rose, then stilled. He looked at Halverson, not defiantly, not smugly, but steadily. "This wasn't memorized," he said. His voice was quiet, but it was math. The words sank into the silence. Principal Behringer, still lingering near the doorway, cleared his throat. "Impressive," he said, though his tone held a strange reluctance, as though the word itself tasted bitter on his tongue. "But let's not get ahead of ourselves. One equation doesn't prove genius." Halverson latched onto it immediately. "Exactly. One flashy stunt doesn't erase tardiness. It doesn't demonstrate discipline. Discipline," he emphasized, "is what separates show-offs from scholars." But the class wasn't buying it anymore. The evidence was too fresh, too undeniable. And then came the unexpected twist. Trent Halverson's golden boy, captain of the math team, raised his hand. Not lazily, not with his usual confidence, but with a kind of urgency. "Mr. Halverson," he said, "I've been working on that problem for 3 weeks. I couldn't get anywhere near a full solution. I checked online forums, contest archives, everything. There's no posted solution. Not for the adjusted version, not even for the original." The room stirred. Students exchanged wide-eyed looks. "If he solved it twice," Trent continued, "then it's not copying. It's not a stunt. It's real." Halverson froze. His authority, usually unquestioned, wavered in plain view. Darius didn't react. He just turned, erased a clean corner of the board, and wrote the title of the second problem. His movements were deliberate, his face calm. The students leaned forward again, anticipation humming. Kayla gripped her phone tighter. Even the principal tilted slightly, his smirk gone, replaced by something harder to read. Darius wrote the first line of the new problem, chalk steady, hand sure. Then he set the stub down and pulled a fresh piece from the tray. The harder problem loomed, the one meant to crush even the math team's best. Without hesitation, Darius lifted the chalk and began working on the second equation. As the room held its breath, waiting to see if lightning could strike twice, the chalk tapped against the board with a sound too soft for the size of the moment. Darius wrote the title of the second problem with a steadiness that unsettled everyone watching. This wasn't the confidence of arrogance. It was the stillness of someone who had carried heavy things before and decided he could carry one more. The equation loomed larger than the first, sprawling across the board with a mess of nested sums and exponential terms. Even the best students in the room shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking between the problem and their desks, as if not looking too hard might shield them from its difficulty. Trent, who had admitted struggling with the first one, leaned forward, his pencil idle in his hand. Halverson adjusted his glasses, trying to summon authority again. "This one," he announced to the class, "has never been solved during school hours. Not by seniors, not by math club members. If Mr. Coleman wishes to keep performing, let's watch how quickly the illusion collapses." A few chuckles rippled. They sounded half-hearted this time, like echoes of a joke no one found funny anymore. Darius ignored the commentary. He took a long breath, let it settle into his chest, and studied the sprawl of terms. He didn't dive in right away. He stood still, head tilted, as though listening to a faint melody no one else could hear. This was how it always began for him. Not with calculation but with patience. His mother used to tease him for it when she'd find him sitting on the floor with puzzle pieces scattered across the carpet. "You look like you're doing nothing." She'd laugh, wiping sweat from her forehead after a long shift. But when she'd return with folded laundry, the puzzle would be halfway done, edges already locked in. He never rushed. He always let the pattern reveal itself first. The class shifted in their chairs. The silence stretched. Then, with deliberate slowness, Darius picked up the chalk again and wrote 2 words above the problem. "Start simple." Trent frowned. That wasn't how they'd been taught to begin. Most students attacked these beasts with brute force, expanding terms, throwing algebra at the walls, and hoping something stuck. Darius was shrinking it, carving away excess like a sculptor chiseling stone. He made his first substitution, an almost childishly simple one. Several students blinked. "Why would he?" one muttered. But then the line that followed clicked into place neatly, canceling out half a page of clutter in a single stroke. Halverson's smirk tightened, though he said nothing. Kayla's phone trembled in her grip. She couldn't look away. She thought of her brother Luke, hunched over this exact problem set last year, frustration written all over his face. He'd quit after 2 days, muttering that problems like this are designed to break you. Watching Darius, she wondered if they weren't designed to break everyone, just certain people more publicly than others. Darius wrote another line, then paused to check it. His lips moved silently, repeating the logic. He crossed out a small error and corrected it instantly. Not perfection, precision. In his head, the classroom dissolved. He was back in his bedroom, the dim light of a secondhand desk lamp spilling across notebooks stacked like towers. Nights when his mother came home late, her shoes kicked off in exhaustion, and he stayed up anyway, scratching through problem sets she'd picked up from thrift stores. Pages yellowed, names of kids he'd never meet scribbled in margins. He learned without tutors, without prep courses, without anyone expecting him to succeed. In that solitude, he'd found rhythm. The rhythm was here now. His hand moved faster, smoother. Each substitution carved new space in the equation. The tangled mess began to look less like a trap and more like a doorway. "He's simplifying it," Trent muttered, more to himself than anyone. Halverson snapped, "Or making mistakes." But Darius wasn't. The chalk clicked against the board with certainty, step folding into step. Every cancellation brought a ripple of energy across the room. Students who'd laughed minutes ago were leaning forward now, pencils scratching as they copied down his work. Kayla caught herself holding her breath. Her eyes flicked to the packet still on Halverson's desk. The untouched second page confirmed what she suspected. This wasn't supposed to be solved here. Not today, not by anyone. Especially not by Darius. The problem was bait, carefully chosen humiliation disguised as rigor. And yet, the board told a different story. Darius whispered under his breath. "If it collapses here," his chalk flew faster. He crossed 2 steps, looped back, adjusted the angle. It wasn't linear work anymore. It was a conversation between him and the problem. Every line an answer to a question. Only he could hear. A girl near the window whispered, "He's actually moving it forward." Another voice countered, "He'll hit a wall." Everyone does, but no wall came. Halverson's jaw tightened. He shifted his stance but didn't interrupt. For the first time he looked less like a conductor and more like a bystander. Minutes passed but the work grew. Each line of chalk was both rebellion and revelation. The racist undertone of the setup, the assumption that Darius would fail, would confirm every stereotype about black students being athletes, but not scholars, was unraveling in real time. Every clean proof undermined the caricature that had been painted of him before he even stepped into the room. Kayla thought again of how many times she'd stayed quiet. Watching now, she felt the silence in her own chest. The complicity of never defending him when others muttered insults in the cafeteria, when teachers overlooked him in group projects. He had been proving himself alone all along. Darius's chalk paused mid-stroke. His head tilted again. The class tensed. Was he stuck? Then he did something no one expected. He erased half the work. Gone in second. Gasps filled the room. What is he doing? A boy hissed. He lost it, another said. But Darius shook his head softly, almost smiling. Too messy, he murmured, then started again, this time with an even cleaner substitution. The board repopulated quickly, sharper than before, the logic even tighter. He wasn't lost. He was refining, pruning the noise. He wasn't afraid to start over because he trusted the map in his mind. Trent exhaled, almost reverent. He's not solving it like us. He's solving it like he owns it. Halverson barked, enough commentary. But his voice lacked bite. The second path clicked faster, smoother, collapsing the sprawl into a symmetry that shimmered with inevitability. The students began to understand, not the math, but the gravity. This wasn't supposed to happen. Yet here it was. Kayla whispered, "He might actually do it." In the silence that followed was heavier than any laughter had been. The realization spread, not whispered now, but unspoken, sitting on every desk and chair like weight. The boy they had all expected to stumble was walking straight into the heart of the hardest problem their school had ever thrown, and the problem was bending to him. As the chalk traced its final substitution into place, the room went utterly still. The giggles, the whispers, even Halverson's corrections, all gone. Every student in the room understood the impossible truth. Darius Coleman might actually solve it. The chalk skated again, quiet but relentless, drawing connections no one else had seen. On the board, the monstrous second problem, once sprawling, terrifying, designed to crush confidence, was shrinking under Darius's hand. Step by step, line by line, the impossible began to look inevitable. Whispers, once mocking, now carried a different edge. How is he doing this?" hissed one boy, in the second row, his tone more anxious than curious. "It's not possible," a girl muttered, shaking her head as though she could dislodge the sight. "He's faking it somehow." "He has to be." Trent, who had been silent for minutes, leaned forward. "He's not faking," he said flatly. He sounded almost angry, not at Darius but at the fact that the truth couldn't be denied. "He's doing it." But others weren't ready to accept what was unfolding in front of them. Riley Hammond, another math team regular, crossed his arms tightly. "No way. He's what? Some kid from the bus line solving a problem none of us could crack. That doesn't happen. He probably saw the solution somewhere and memorized it." "You heard Trent," someone whispered back. "There isn't a solution online." "Then he stole it," Riley shot back, his face flushed with something heavier than skepticism. It was fear, the kind that arrives when your place in the pecking order suddenly feels unstable. The air in the classroom thickened. Jealousy seeped in like smoke, subtle but suffocating. For years, Easton Ridge's advanced classes had been dominated by the same faces, the same families. To watch someone like Darius, someone who wasn't supposed to belong here, unravel their sacred problems was more than a shock. It was a threat. Kayla felt it, too. She heard the sharpness in Riley's tone, the subtle racial undertones slipping through. It wasn't just how Darius was doing this, it was who was doing it. The thought twisted her stomach. She thought of all the times she'd laughed along with small jokes, all the times she hadn't spoken up when she should have. Meanwhile, Darius's chalk kept moving. The patterns were emerging now, symmetry folding, where there had once been chaos. His substitutions carved pathways like rivers, meeting in a valley. He stepped back, studied his work, and underlined a new equivalence. The entire left-hand side had lost into something shockingly simple. He allowed himself the smallest exhale, proof that he was halfway there. The class gasped. Halfway. Whispers ignited again, but this time they didn't sound like awe. They sounded like panic. "This is insane. No one's ever gotten this far. If he finishes it, then what? He gets to be the genius now?" The words weren't just about math anymore. They were about territory, about identity, about who had permission to wear brilliance, like armor. Darius, still quiet, still calm, erased a margin and kept going. His mind was running fast but not chaotic. The work was flowing in rhythm, echoing the countless nights he'd studied by lamplight, fueled, not by tutors or test prep, but by raw hunger. Halverson's face had gone stiff. He paced near the windows, his jaw clenching tighter with each line. Darius added. His authority, once absolute, was unraveling in front of him. This wasn't the humiliation he had orchestrated. It was reversal. And it was happening in real time. Kayla's phone captured everything. The chalk strokes, the tense faces, the way envy slid across the room like a shadow. She heard Riley hiss again. He's making us look like idiots. He's making you look like an idiot. Trent shot back, his voice sharper than before. He's showing actual work. You can't fake that. Riley's jaw tightened. Easy for you to say. You'll always get the spotlight anyway. He jerked his chin toward Darius. But if he does this, what do you think it means for the rest of us? Every competition, every scholarship, we're done. They'll parade him around like some miracle. The bitterness hung heavy. Jealousy was no longer whispered. It was snarled, barely disguised with coded language. Done because he's smarter than you? Trent snapped. Or done because you can't stand that it's him? The words froze Riley, but his glare at Darius said everything. Darius didn't turn around. He had trained himself for years to ignore looks like that. He knew what they meant. He knew the quiet hatred that grew when expectations were defied. His focus stayed locked on the board, where the tangled problem was collapsing even faster now. He drew another arrow, set another boundary, and the room inhaled sharply. Patterns were emerging so clearly that even the weaker students could follow pieces of it. He was stripping away complexity with every line, peeling back the layers until what had once been monstrous now looked human. He's actually gonna do it, someone whispered. Halverson froze mid-step. Enough, he snapped. He slammed his palm against his desk, the sharp crack echoing through the room. Everyone jumped. Kayla's phone trembled violently in her hand. Darius turned slowly, chalk still in his fingers. His expression was unreadable, calm but not cowed. You've had your fun, Halverson said, voice low. Dangerous. This demonstration is over. Sit down, Coleman. The room fell into stunned silence. The equation on the board was half complete, undeniable progress glowing from every line. But Halverson's demand cut through like a blade. Kayla's heart pounded. She wanted to speak, to tell the truth, to defend what was happening before her eyes. But the weight of authority, of the teacher, of the principal still hovering outside, kept her voice locked in her throat. Darius looked back at the board. The path was there, waiting. The patterns were singing. His hand twitched, chalk ready to move age. And then Halverson slammed his desk a second time. Louder, the sound cracking through the silence like a gavel. I said the echo of Halverson's desk slam lingered in the room like a gunshot, ricocheting off the walls and pressing against everyone's chest. The students sat frozen, eyes darting between their teacher and Darius. The tension so taut it felt as if the slightest breath might snap it in two. Darius still stood before the board, chalk in hand, half of the second equation solved in lines so clean they could have been printed. The proof of his progress glowed from the board, undeniable, irrefutable, and yet Halverson's voice cut through it like a blade. I said stop, the teacher barked again, louder this time. His face had flushed, his jaw tight. This charade has gone on long enough. Kayla's phone trembled in her hand. She wanted to scream at him. It's not a charade, it's real. You know it's real. But the fear of stepping out of line, of being targeted herself, glued her lips shut. Darius looked at Halverson, steady but silent. He didn't lower the chalk. His stillness was defiance enough. Halverson strode toward the board, his fingers stabbing at Darius's work. This is not proof of intelligence. This is proof of dishonesty. You think I don't know a trick when I see one. These problems, he gestured wildly, they are designed to expose frauds. You were never meant to solve them, because they can't be solved this way. The room erupted in murmurs, disbelief mixing with confusion. That doesn't make sense, Trent muttered under his breath. He's just mad he's wrong, someone whispered from the back. Halverson whipped around, glaring at the rows of students. Quiet, all of you. You're too young to understand what's happening here. But they understood more than he thought. They saw the cracks in his authority, the fear behind his anger. They saw a man unraveling in the face of a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. You copied this, Halverson snapped, turning back to Darius. From where I don't know. But don't think for a second you fooled me. A boy like you. His words faltered, but the implication hung heavy in the air. A boy like you. The phrase hit Darius like a familiar bruise. One pressed again and again, over the years until the skin never quite healed. He'd heard it from counselors, from teachers, from neighbors who looked at his textbooks with surprise, instead of pride. A boy like him wasn't supposed to hold brilliance in his hands. A boy like him wasn't supposed to take up this space. Kayla felt her stomach twist. She had heard the same coded words before, tossed casually in her home, in whispers among friends. But hearing it here spoken so bluntly, in a room filled with witnesses, made the ugliness undeniable. "That's not fair," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Heads turned toward her. Startled. Kayla's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "He's showing every step. If he copied it, where's it from? No one else has solved it. Not even the math team." Halverson's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Ms. Myers, I suggest you think carefully before inserting yourself where you don't belong." Her shoulders stiffened. She shrank slightly under his glare, but she didn't retract her words. Trent stood next, his voice steady. "She's right. I've spent weeks on that problem. If he's faking it better than anyone alive." A ripple of agreement moved through the class. Whispers rose, not mocking this time, but support. "Let him finish. Yeah, he's already halfway. Why stop him if he's wrong?" Halverson slammed his hand against the desk again, silencing them. "This isn't a democracy. This is my classroom. And in my classroom, we do not reward lateness with performances meant to inflate egos. Or challenge yours," someone muttered near the back. A nervous laugh rippled, but it was enough. Halverson's mask cracked. His voice sharpened. "He was never meant to solve this problem. Do you understand? Never. These problems are tools for discipline, for order, not opportunities for grandstanding. He has crossed a line." The words settled like ash. They weren't about math anymore. They were about power, about who had the right to define brilliance, and who was only meant to be an example of failure. Darius turned back to the board. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply lifted the chalk again. Halverson lunged forward. "Sit down." But before he could reach him, a voice from the back shouted, "Let him finish." Another joined, then another. Within seconds, half the room was chanting softly, urging, demanding, "Let him finish. Let him finish." Kayla's heart pounded. She found her voice joining the chorus, shaky but determined. Halverson froze mid-step. His authority, once absolute, was crumbling in plain sight. His class was siding against him, not out of rebellion, but out of truth. They saw what he didn't want them to see, brilliance in the hands of someone who wasn't supposed to own it. The principal, still lingering outside, peeked in again, his brows furrowed at the sight of the chanting students. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Halverson, is there a problem?" Halverson turned, flustered. "No, Principal Behringer, no problem. Just spirited discussion." Behringer's gaze slid to the board. His lips pursed. He didn't say anything more, but he didn't leave either. Darius, unshaken, turned back to the board. His hand moved faster now, the chalk flying as though racing, the weight of disbelief pressing against him. The patterns opened wider, collapsing into symmetry, then into elegance. Each line glowed like a declaration. Kayla's eyes widened. She could see it. The end was near. The impossible was bending again, just as the first problem had. Halverson's face burned red. "Enough," he shouted, voice cracking. "I won't allow this. This is cheating. You think you're clever, Coleman? You think you're the first student to try to make me look like a fool? You think you can rewrite the rules of my classroom?" Darius's chalk scratched one last line, then another. His breathing steadied. His mind felt sharp as glass, slicing cleanly through every barrier placed before him. He stepped back. The second problem, once a weapon of humiliation, was complete. Solved. Finished. The room erupted in gasps. Then stunned silence. The chalk slipped from Darius's fingers, clattering to the floor with a sound that felt louder than Halverson's slams, louder than the whispers, louder than the smirks. Darius looked at the board, then at the stunned faces of his classmates, and simply said, "It's done." The chalk rolled across the floor, spinning lazily, until it stopped near the front row. For a moment, the only sound in the room was its final clink against the tile. The board loomed above them all, covered in white lines that shimmered with finality. Both problems solved, both declared possible, both conquered by the boy who was never supposed to be more than a cautionary tale. Silence stretched long enough to sting. Then the room exploded. Half the class burst into applause, desks shaking as hands slapped against wood. The other half drowned them in protests, jealous whispers hardening into sharp accusation. "No way. That's fake. He didn't really solve it. He cheated. Had to. That's impossible." The noise collided, applause and outrage clashing, until the air was thick with sound. Students turned on each other, voices rising, disbelief turning into argument. Kayla's hand trembled as she raised her phone higher, catching the board in full frame. Every line was visible, every substitution documented, the two finished solutions glaring back at anyone who doubted. Her thumb hovered for a moment before she pressed save. The weight of what she held in her hand sank in. This was proof. This was history. Trent's voice rose above the chaos, louder than anyone expected. He did it. Don't you get it? Both problems. They're finished. The room faltered, some students going quiet, others muttering louder. Halverson, red-faced and trembling, slammed his desk again. Sit down, all of you. Sit down immediately. His voice cracked with strain. This circus is over. But the students didn't obey. The divide only sharpened. One group clapped harder, standing, their faces alight with something between awe and rebellion. Another group turned toward them with snarls, accusing Darius of making them look small. Kayla had never seen anything like it. Easton Ridge was polished, contained, orderly. Arguments here were quiet, tucked away, but now the veneer cracked wide open. The truth spilling into daylight. Riley Hammond, still burning with envy, pointed directly at Darius. He had to have stolen that. Nobody just walks in late and solves stuff seniors couldn't. He didn't steal anything. Kayla shouted suddenly, her voice carrying further than she imagined. Her face flushed, but she didn't stop. I saw the packet on Halverson's desk. He changed the coefficients. Darius caught it. None of you did. Gasps sliced through the noise. Eyes swung to Halverson, whose face drained, then darkened. That's enough, he snapped. Sit down, Miss Myers, or I'll have you removed for spreading lies. But the damage was done. The whisper had turned into a fire. Students who had doubted now exchanged looks, their expressions shifting as they realized what she said made sense. Darius hadn't just solved the problems, he had spotted the traps they hadn't even known were there. Trent stood, his voice sharp. She's not lying. I saw the same thing. The packet was altered. Halverson's composure cracked. Out. Both of you. Out of my classroom now. But the chant had already begun again, rippling louder, defiant. Let him finish. Let him finish. Even though the chalk already lay on the floor. Even though the board was complete. Darius hadn't moved since the chalk slipped from his fingers. His chest rose and fell slowly, his eyes steady as he stared at the board. He wasn't triumphant. He wasn't smug. He was simply calm, like someone who had carried a burden for too long and had finally set it down. The proof was there, undeniable, and that truth was more dangerous to Halverson than failure could have ever been. The door creaked open wider, and Principal Behringer stepped inside at last. His shoes clicked against the tile as he scanned the room, students standing, clapping, shouting, others glaring, muttering. Kayla holding her phone like a weapon, Halverson flushed and frantic, and at the center Darius, quiet, unshaken, standing before two finished problems that should have silenced every doubt. Instead of pride, the principal's expression carried something else. Calculation. He studied the board, then the boy, then the teacher. His lips curled into a thin, knowing smile. Well, he said slowly, his voice calm against the chaos. This is quite the disruption. Halverson seized the lifeline. Exactly. A disruption. A mockery of order. This student has embarrassed the institution with theatrics and dishonesty. Trent barked back. That's not dishonesty. That's math. You just don't like who solved it. The class erupted again, voices crashing over each other. Behringer raised a hand. The noise dimmed. He turned his gaze to Darius, his eyes cold. Mr. Coleman, he said, each syllable clipped. Collect your things. The room froze. Darius blinked. What? You're leaving this classroom, Behringer said, his tone final. Now. You've disrupted instruction long enough. Kayla shot up from her seat. But he solved them. Both of them. Enough. Behringer snapped, his voice sharp enough to slice the air. This is not a debate. This is about respect, discipline, and order. Mr. Coleman disrespected his teacher, disrupted the class, and undermined the integrity of this school's standards. He will not remain here another minute. The silence that followed was suffocating. Some students looked outraged. Others smirked with relief. The balance had shifted again, not because the math was wrong, but because the system refused to let it be right in the wrong hands. Darius's fingers twitched at his sides, but he didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply looked back at the board, then at the chalk still lying on the floor. His eyes carried no triumph now, only clarity. The understanding that brilliance wasn't enough when the rules were designed to break him. "Escort him," Berenger ordered flatly. Gasps rippled across the room as the command landed. 2 hall monitors appeared at the door, stepping inside. The principal pointed at Darius. "Take him out." The command still echoed in the classroom when the hall monitors moved toward Darius. His classmates sat frozen, some with mouths open, others gripping their desks as if bracing themselves. The board behind him glowed with proof. 2 solved problems, crisp and undeniable, but the institution had already decided the solution was less dangerous to erase than to admit. Darius didn't resist. He gathered his notebook slowly, slipping the pencil he'd borrowed into its spine. His hand brushed the chalk still lying on the floor. He didn't pick it up. He just looked at it for a long second, before following the monitors out. Kayla's phone was still recording, her fingers trembling. She captured everything. The board, the solutions, Halverson's fury, Berenger's order, the hall monitors leading Darius away. When the door closed behind him, the silence in the room felt like a sealed vault, one stuffed with something too heavy to contain. She ended the recording and immediately saved it to her cloud. Her heart hammered. She knew what she had was dangerous, but she also knew it was necessary. That night, in the dim glow of her bedroom, Kayla opened TikTok. Her thumb hovered over the upload button. The video file pulsed in her gallery, waiting. She thought of Halverson's glare, Berenger's cold command, her parents' likely disapproval, but she also thought of the look on Darius's face, the quiet steadiness of someone who had been forced to fight for the right to exist in spaces designed to push him out. She uploaded it. Title: Black Student Solves 2 Impossible Problems. Gets Escorted Out. Her phone buzzed before she even set it down. The first comments rolled in within minutes.
"Wait, once you solve those?"
"This is insane. Protect this kid. The teacher should be fired." By midnight, the video had already reached 50,000 views. By morning, it had crossed 1 million. On Twitter, the clip spread like fire. People reposted it with captions that ranged from awe to outrage. "Brilliance doesn't look the way you expect. A genius in a hoodie kicked out instead of celebrated. Systemic racism in real time. Watch this." The phrase "black genius" trended by noon. News anchors debated the clip. Commentators filled panels. Some called it inspiring. Others tried to discredit it. Kayla scrolled through her phone in shock. She watched journalists dissect the same 10 minutes she had witnessed in person. Memes sprouted overnight. A chalkboard covered in numbers with the caption, "And they still said he was wrong." But the most powerful reactions came from strangers. Messages poured into her inbox from students across the country, black, brown, even white, sharing stories of being underestimated, dismissed, punished for daring to excel. They saw themselves in Darius. His fight had become theirs. Meanwhile, Darius sat at the small kitchen table of his apartment, his mother beside him, her face a mix of pride and fear. She held her phone, scrolling through headlines she could barely process. "Darius," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you are everywhere." He looked down at his hands. The chalk dust still lingered under his nails, a reminder of the board, the noise, the accusations. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had finally been seen and punished for it. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly. "I know," his mother replied, gripping his hand, "but maybe this is bigger than what you asked for." By the next day, major outlets had picked up the story. CNN ran the headline, "Black Teen Solves Problems That Stumped Competitions." Fox countered with, "Hoax? Viral video of student sparks debate over academic standards." Mathematicians weighed in, on YouTube, some pausing the video frame by frame to analyze Darius's steps. Many confirmed what Kayla's footage already proved. The boy wasn't faking. His logic was airtight. His method was original. One professor from MIT tweeted, "Whoever this student is, his process is extraordinary. We need to find him." The world had found him, but the world wasn't united in how to treat him. Back at Easton Ridge, the atmosphere turned poisonous. Students whispered in hallways, some proudly declaring they'd witnessed history, others sneering about cheating and attention-seeking. The teachers avoided eye contact. Halverson carried himself with brittle authority, but his fury burned so hot it was visible in the stiffness of his posture. And then came the school board's statement. At 5 p.m. the day after the video went viral, Easton Ridge School District released a press release on its website and to local news outlets. The viral video circulating online misrepresents the events in one of our classrooms. The so-called solutions to these problems were not authentic, but staged, part of a fabricated performance orchestrated by the student in question. While we celebrate academic effort, we do not condone dishonesty or disruption. We urge the public not to be misled by online hoaxes. The word hung heavy. Hoax. Kayla's phone buzzed non-stop. Her video was being dissected, slowed down, paused, annotated. Some pointed to shadows on the board, claiming edits. Others argued that the problems themselves had been altered for dramatic effect. She stared at the statement on the school's website, her throat tight. She had sat there. She had watched every line drawn. And now the institution was rewriting reality to erase what she had witnessed. Darius saw the statement too. His stomach dropped as his mother read it aloud, her voice breaking. "They're calling you a liar," she whispered. He closed his eyes. He thought of the chalk breaking in his hand, of Halverson's glare, of Behringer's cold command. He thought of every "a boy like you" he had ever heard. And now the world was hearing it too. Just dressed in formal language. That night, TikTok and Twitter buzzed louder than ever. Millions debated whether the video was real. Hashtags like Darius Coleman, Black Genius, and Math Hoax trended simultaneously. A teacher from another state posted, "Watch closely. The steps are consistent. This is real. The board is lying." An alt-right influencer countered, "Classic. Another fake prodigy story. Don't fall for it." Darius sat in the dark of his bedroom, his phone screen glowing against his face. He scrolled through the comments, the praise and the doubt crashing into each other. Some called him a role model. Others called him a fraud. He dropped the phone onto his pillow and covered his face with his hands. For years he had fought in silence against teachers, counselors, neighbors who doubted him. Now his fight was in front of millions. And still the system's first instinct was the same: deny. As the video passed 10 million views, the news broke on his phone. The school board had scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss his disciplinary consequences. The morning after the school board's statement, Darius woke to the sound of his mother's phone buzzing non-stop on the kitchen counter. The television was already on, the volume low, but the scrolling ticker at the bottom of CNN carried his name like a headline for a trial. Students' viral math solution sparks debate, brilliance or hoax. Darius sat at the table, his untouched cereal growing soggy. His mother, Denise, paced the small kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice cracked between polite thank yous and sharp refusals. News stations wanted interviews. Strangers demanded explanation. Some messages came with congratulations. Others dripped with venom. "Denise Coleman," one caller had asked bluntly before hanging up. "You know your son didn't really do it, right? Kids like him don't solve math problems. They cause them." She had slammed the phone down, shaking. Now the living room flickered with cable news panels. A CNN anchor spoke over a replay of Kayla's video. Slowed down. Zoomed in. Experts agree the student's process appears logical. But questions remain. Was this a spontaneous display of genius, or a carefully crafted hoax? The screen split into three boxes: a black professor from Howard University, a white columnist from a conservative magazine, and a political strategist. "It's authentic," the professor insisted. "Look at the step-by-step consistency. This is not memorization, it's original problem-solving." The columnist smirked. "It's convenient, isn't it? A viral clip that fits a social narrative. I'm not saying the young man isn't bright, but brilliance doesn't emerge like this. It looks staged." The strategist chimed in, "Whether or not it's real, it's a symbol now. And symbols are dangerous when they disrupt established hierarchies." Denise muted the TV, her hand trembling on the remote. "They're talking about you like you're not even human," she whispered. Darius stared at the blank bowl, his throat dry. "That's nothing new," he said quietly. By afternoon, Fox News had grabbed the story. Their headline read, "Viral Math Genius, Hoax or Victim Narrative." A panel of commentators mocked the idea that a 16-year-old from the wrong zip code could outthink seasoned competitors. One guest laughed openly. "Let's be real. This is about race. They want to push a story about a black kid overcoming the odds. But if you watch closely, the steps don't even make sense. It's propaganda." Social media echoed the broadcast. Twitter threads claimed the video was AI edited. Facebook groups shared conspiracy posts, accusing Denise of coaching her son for fame. YouTube channels ran titles, like "Exposing the Math Hoax Kid," with thumbnails of Darius's face circled in red. And then came the neighbors. When Denise went to the mailbox, she felt eyes on her. Mrs. Miller, who used to greet her warmly on Saturdays, turned her head away. A man she barely knew muttered as she passed, "Famous now, huh? Don't forget where you came from." Darius noticed it too. On the bus, kids he'd grown up with avoided him. Some muttered slurs under their breath, sharp enough to cut. Others accused him of making their school look bad. One night, someone spray-painted "liar" across their apartment door. Denise scrubbed at it until her hands blistered, tears streaking her cheeks. Darius tried to help, but she pushed him back gently. "You shouldn't have to clean up their hate," she whispered. The fame that had once looked like light was quickly turning hostile. Meanwhile, the press closed in. CNN requested an exclusive interview. Denise hesitated, but Darius agreed, hoping maybe truth could cut through noise. The day of the interview, bright lights flooded their living room. A reporter sat across from him, smiling tightly. "Darius," she began, "millions have seen the video. Some call you a prodigy. Others call you a fraud. What do you say to the skeptics?" Darius kept his voice steady. "Math doesn't care about skin color. It doesn't care about narratives. I showed the work. If they don't believe me, that's on them. But the numbers don't lie." The clip aired that evening, sparking another wave of debate. Supporters hailed his composure. Critics dissected his tone, calling him arrogant. One commentator sneered, "Look at him already acting like he's better than everyone else." Kayla watched from her bedroom, guilt clawing at her chest. She wanted to shout that he was better, that his work proved it, that the video wasn't staged, but she hadn't spoken publicly yet, and fear anchored her silence. By the end of the week, the Coleman's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Supporters offered scholarships. Strangers demanded proof. Trolls sent threats. Denise unplugged the landline. But the noise bled through every device. Then, late one night, as Darius scrolled Twitter in the dim light of his room, a new notification appeared. A verified account. Dr. Richard Allen, MIT professor of mathematics. His tweet was simple: "The work in this video is legitimate. Whoever this student is, I want to talk to him, urgently." Darius sat up straight, his heart pounding. He read the tweet 3 times before whispering, "Mom." Denise rushed in, her face weary from days of battle. He handed her the phone. Her eyes widened. "MIT," she breathed. Her voice cracked. "Darius, MIT." For the first time in days, hope flickered. Amid the storm, someone with power had seen not a hoax, not a threat, but a mind worth listening to. Denise's phone buzzed again. This time an email. Subject line: "Invitation to Cambridge, ASAP." The email from MIT didn't just sit quietly in Denise's inbox. It detonated. The subject line glowed in bold on her cracked phone screen: "Invitation to Cambridge, ASAP." The message itself was brief, polite, and breathtaking. "We have reviewed the viral footage of your son's problem solving. We would like to meet him in person. Please confirm availability for a visit to the MIT mathematics department at your earliest convenience." Denise read it 3 times, her hand trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Darius stood beside her, his heart pounding so loudly, he could hear it in his ears. For the first time since the chaos began, his mind didn't feel like a battlefield. A door one he'd only dared to dream about had cracked open. But the door didn't open without resistance. Over the next week, universities flooded their inbox with offers. Yale, Princeton, Stanford. Professors sent personal notes praising his methods. Graduate students emailed, eager to learn from him. On Twitter, mathematicians posted threads analyzing his solutions frame by frame, confirming their originality. Some even speculated that his substitutions showed a kind of creativity absent from conventional training. "This is not mimicry," one professor wrote. "This is discovery." Yet at Easton Ridge, the narrative stayed frozen. Principal Behringer doubled down in press statements, calling the viral video a misleading portrayal of classroom events. Halverson avoided reporters, but in closed faculty meetings he declared Darius's work a cleverly staged performance. The administration refused to release the original problem set, insisting it was internal material not meant for public consumption. For every door that opened in Cambridge and New Haven, another slammed shut in the halls of Easton Ridge. The tension boiled over at the next parents' meeting. The auditorium was packed, not with the usual quiet crowd of PTA regulars, but with dozens of furious parents, some defending Darius, others demanding his punishment. Reporters circled outside, barred from entry but eager for leaks. Denise sat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her son beside her. Darius wore the same hoodie he had the day of the incident. Its sleeves frayed, its zipper crooked. It wasn't rebellion, it was the only jacket he owned. But to some it looked like defiance. The meeting began with Behringer's measured voice echoing through the mic. We are here to address concerns about recent events. Let me emphasize, Easton Ridge maintains the highest standards of academic integrity. We will not allow dishonesty to undermine our institution. Whispers rippled. Denise's jaw clenched. A white parent stood up, his face flushed. My daughter works hard. Harder than anyone. And now she has to watch this so-called prodigy steal the spotlight? We know what's happening here. He was given the answers, handed them because of politics. Gasps and nods moved through the room. Denise shot up from her seat, fury finally breaking past restraint. My son wasn't given anything, she shouted. He worked for years with nothing but borrowed books and old notebooks. He saw what your children couldn't. Don't you dare reduce his brilliance to a handout. Her voice cracked, but it didn't waver. The father sneered. You expect us to believe that? A kid like him? Please. The phrase hung in the air, like poison. Darius lowered his head. He'd heard it too many times, but in this room with his mother defending him, the sting hit deeper. His knuckles tightened against his knees. Another parent stood, this one a mother with sharp features. This is an embarrassment. Our school's reputation is at stake. Everyone's laughing at Easton Ridge. And why? Because one student manipulated a viral video to make us look racist. It wasn't manipulated. Kayla's voice rang out suddenly from the back. She had come alone, without her parents. Her phone clutched tight. Her face burned as dozens of eyes swung toward her. I recorded it. I was there. I saw every line. He solved it. Twice. Murmurs broke out. Some scoffed. Others leaned forward with curiosity. Behringer's face hardened. Ms. Myers, I remind you that students are not permitted to film in classrooms without consent. I don't care, Kayla said, her voice shaking but firm. The truth matters more than your rules. For a split second, the room went utterly silent. Then the noise surged again, louder, angrier, the divide growing deeper. Amid the chaos, a new voice cut through, a voice amplified not by anger, but by authority. Dr. Richard Allen, the MIT professor who had first tweeted in Darius's defense, stepped forward from the side aisle. His gray suit stood out against the sea of parents in casual wear, his presence unexpected but undeniable. He adjusted his glasses and spoke into the mic with calm precision. My name is Dr. Allen, he said. I'm a professor of mathematics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I came here tonight because what I witnessed in that video was not a hoax. It was not staged. It was mathematics, pure and elegant. Gasps swept through the crowd. Behringer shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Allen, this is a closed meeting. Allen cut him off, his voice rising. Then close it around the truth. But do not lie to yourselves about what that boy achieved. His substitutions were original. His logic sound. I have PhD candidates who could not have seen what he saw, and you would rather brand him a cheat than admit your prejudice blinded you. The room exploded into noise, some clapping, others shouting in protest. Parents argued in the aisles, the meeting dissolving into chaos. Denise reached for her son's hand, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in the fight. Someone with power was standing beside them. Halverson, red-faced and trembling at the back, finally snapped. If you're so certain, he shouted across the room, why don't you prove it? Why don't you take the problem set and solve it yourself? Dr. Allen turned toward him, his eyes sharp behind his glasses. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Mr. Halverson, he said, I challenge you to redo the problem yourself on that board in front of this room, since you claim it was impossible the way Darius solved it. The auditorium fell silent again, the air electric. Parents leaned forward. Students held their breath. All eyes shifted to Halverson, his smirk gone, his authority trembling under the weight of the challenge. Dr. Allen pointed toward the stage's whiteboard. Show us, he said, or admit that the boy you tried to humiliate outperformed you. The challenge from Dr. Allen hung in the air like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Every parent in the auditorium had gone silent, every student holding their breath. Halverson stood at the edge of the stage, his knuckles white against the arm of a chair, sweat shining along his temple. He didn't step forward. He didn't pick up the marker. His silence was answer enough. But silence didn't erase the damage already done. That night, Denise pulled her son close as they walked back to their apartment. The glow of streetlights stretching shadows across cracked sidewalks. The noise from the meeting still echoed in both their ears. The applause for Dr. Allen. The mutters of parents spitting words like cheater and fraud. The glares thrown at Darius as though his brilliance had been a crime. When they reached their door, Denise froze. Black spray paint stretched across the wood, jagged and furious. Fake. Her breath caught. Darius stared at it, numb, his hands shaking at his sides. Neighbors passed without stopping. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed by their own silence. Others smirked faintly, muttering under their breath. Denise fumbled for her keys, tears burning her eyes. Inside, she whispered to her son, "Just get inside." The word stayed there all night. Fake. It felt heavier than the lock on their door, heavier than the entire apartment. The threats began within days. Anonymous calls late at night, voices growling through static. "You embarrassed the school. You'll regret it. Tell your boy to shut his mouth before someone shuts it for him. Fraud." Denise unplugged the phone, but the messages migrated online, their inbox filled with hate mail. Social media tagged Darius's name with slurs, doctored images of him in orange jumpsuits, captions branding him a criminal instead of a student.
The boy who had solved the unsolvable became the boy hunted by disbelief.
At school, the atmosphere curdled further. Students who had once laughed at him now sneered openly. Some whispered liar as he passed. Others shoved into him in the hallways, their shoulders sharp against his. Teachers avoided his eyes, afraid to be seen as supportive. One afternoon, while he sat at his desk, he overheard a group in the back row. "Doesn't matter if he solved it. Nobody's ever gonna believe him. Yeah, he'll never be one of us. They'll make sure of it." The words pierced deeper than slurs. "Not one of us." That was the line drawn in permanent ink. At home, the pressure finally cracked him. Darius sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, his notebook open but untouched. The same pages that had once been filled with numbers now sat blank, his pencil idle. His mother hovered nearby, pretending to do dishes, her eyes flicking toward him every few seconds. He finally whispered, "What's the point?" Denise turned, drying her hands on a towel. "What do you mean?" "They'll never let me win," he said, his voice breaking. "It doesn't matter how many problems I solve. It doesn't matter if I'm right. I'll always be the kid they don't believe. I'll always be the fraud in their eyes." His mother knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Darius, listen to me. They don't get to decide who you are. They already have," he muttered. "They spray it on our door. They whisper it in the halls. They send it to my phone. I'm tired, Mom. I don't want to fight anymore." Denise's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to give him certainty, to promise it would get better, but the truth pressed heavy on her chest. She couldn't erase the ugliness of the world outside their walls. All she could do was hold him tighter. "You're more than their lies," she whispered, "even when they try to bury you." But the world wouldn't stop pressing down. A local paper published an editorial, "Why the Math Hoax Hurts Real Students." It accused Darius of stealing attention from legitimate achievers, framing him as a distraction instead of a discovery. A radio host mocked him live on air, his laughter cruel. And then came the rock. One evening, while Denise cooked dinner, a crash shattered their living room window. Glass scattered across the floor. Darius froze, his heart hammering. Outside, footsteps pounded against pavement, as voices shouted and faded into the night. On the floor beside the shattered glass lay a brick wrapped in newspaper. In thick marker, the word liar was scrawled across it. Denise pulled her son back, shielding him with her arms, her body trembling. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They won't stop until..." She didn't finish the sentence. That night, Darius sat awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. The noise of sirens in the distance blended with the memory of voices calling him a fraud. His mind, once alive with equations, felt empty. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for his notebook. He pulled the covers over his head and tried not to exist. In the dark, his own thoughts betrayed him. What if they're right? What if it doesn't matter how smart I am? If the world has already decided I don't belong? What if solving problems just creates bigger ones? Tears burned his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Then the twist. 3 days later, Denise's phone buzzed with a new email. She nearly ignored it. Another threat, another insult. But the sender's address froze her in place. International Journal of Mathematics and Innovation. The subject line, submission accepted. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a formal letter. We are honored to inform you that your son's problem-solving method, submitted for review by Dr. Richard Allen, has been peer-reviewed and accepted for publication in our upcoming issue. His substitutions represent an original approach that expands on existing frameworks. His name will be credited as the author. Denise's knees buckled. She clutched the counter for balance. Her mouth open but no sound coming out. Darius, she called, her voice breaking. He rushed in, alarmed. What is it? She handed him the phone. His eyes scanned the words, disbelief flooding his face. His name printed alongside words like peer-reviewed and accepted for publication. He dropped into a chair, his chest rising and falling too fast. For days, he had wondered if it was worth it. For days, he had carried the word fake carved into his skin. But here in black and white was something the world couldn't spray paint over. Recognition. Mom, he whispered. His lips trembled, but this time not from despair. They published me. As Denise hugged her son, tears streaming down her cheeks, the news broke online within hours. A global math journal had published Darius Coleman's solution. The world was no longer debating a viral video. It was debating a peer-reviewed discovery. The email from the International Journal of Mathematics spread like fire through the academic world. Within 24 hours, screenshots of the acceptance letter appeared on Twitter, then on CNN's ticker, then on BBC's morning broadcast. For the first time since his name had gone viral, the headlines weren't laced with suspicion. They carried awe. Teen's viral solution confirmed by peer-reviewed journal. From hoax to history, Black student publishes in Global Math Journal. It's Darius Coleman's method called revolutionary. Denise sat at the kitchen table again, but this time her tears were different. Pride and disbelief tangled in her chest as her son scrolled through messages pouring in from professors across the globe. Invitations to lecture, offers of mentorship, prestigious scholarships attached with phrases like full ride and honorary fellowship. The same boy who had once scribbled equations under the hum of a flickering lamp was now being recognized as a mind that mattered. The first time he walked onto a stage, it was at a mathematics conference in Chicago. Hundreds of academics filled the hall, their murmurs quieting as he approached the podium in a suit borrowed from a neighbor. His hands trembled at his sides, but when the spotlight hit his face, something steadied inside him. He opened with the same phrase he'd whispered to himself in that suffocating classroom weeks ago. Start simple. The audience laughed lightly, then leaned forward as he began outlining his substitutions. He didn't just repeat what he had written on Halverson's board. He expanded, layering insights he'd honed in the sleepless nights since. His logic built step by step, each revelation punctuated by nods and gasps from mathematicians who realized they were witnessing something rare. When he finished, the hall rose to its feet. The applause wasn't scattered, it was tidal, a wave that crashed against him until his chest swelled with something he had once thought impossible: acceptance. But redemption didn't arrive without shadows. Outside the hall, cameras waited. Reporters jostled for sound bites, their questions sharp. Darius, what do you say to those who still call it a hoax? Do you believe your race influenced the backlash? Are you angry at your school? He answered softly but firmly. The math was never a hoax. My race influenced their response. Yes, but it also influences my resilience. I'm not angry at my school. I'm determined that no one else will be silenced the way I was. The clip went viral. This time, the world didn't mock. They listened. Scholarships began pouring in, letters embossed with seals from Ivy Leagues, European institutes, even universities in Africa, inviting him to study as a symbol of homegrown brilliance. MIT extended a full ride, complete with a mentorship under Dr. Richard Allen himself. Princeton followed. Stanford matched. For a boy who had once been told kids like you don't make it to MIT, the offers felt surreal. Yet Darius wasn't intoxicated by them. Each letter was a reminder of the door he had been told was bolted shut. Now it swung open, but only because he'd broken it first. At home, Denise taped the letters to the refrigerator. Their tiny kitchen glowed with possibility. Each envelope a paper window into a future that once felt unreachable. You did this, she whispered one evening, pressing her forehead to her son's. They tried to bury you, but you grew anyway. Across the country, Black students shared his story in classrooms and cafeterias. Teachers began printing his proof, using it as an example of creativity. Social media tagged him in posts with captions like "Representation matters" and "Brilliance wears every color." Darius became more than a student. He became a symbol for every kid told to lower their hand, for every genius overlooked because of bias. His chalkboard victory became proof that silence could be broken. Yet even as the world celebrated, Darius carried the memory of that day. The laughter, the slurs, the word fake sprayed across his door. Redemption didn't erase wounds. It only gave them context. The unexpected twist came when Time magazine called. They named him one of the top 25 teens who changed the world. His photograph appeared on the cover, a boy in a hoodie, arms crossed, a chalkboard behind him. The caption read, "The genius they tried to erase." Denise bought 3 copies from the corner store. When she placed one on their table, Darius stared at it for a long time. His reflection looked back at him through glossy paper, older somehow, not because of age but because of what he had endured. "Mom," he whispered, "what if I can't live up to this?" "You already have," she replied. Months passed. The conferences grew larger, the applause louder, but Darius stayed tethered to the moment where it began. Not the ovations, not the headlines, but the chalk dust on his fingers, the silence in a classroom where he had been set up to fail. It was that memory that guided his next decision. When the school year neared its end, he requested one thing from the district: permission to return to room 2114, the math classroom where it all started. Not as a student, but as himself. The board resisted at first, fearing publicity, fearing exposure, but pressure from the public and from MIT's Professor Allen forced their hand. Reluctantly, they agreed. On a rainy Thursday morning, Darius walked down the familiar hallways of Easton Ridge. Students stared, whispering, their eyes wide. Some clapped quietly as he passed. Others turned away, still unwilling to face the truth. Denise walked with him, her hand steady on his shoulder. Dr. Allen trailed behind, his presence undeniable. When they reached the door of room 2114, Darius paused. The smell of chalk and disinfectant hit him like memory itself. He stepped inside, the desks arranged the same way, the board wiped clean as though trying to erase the past. Mr. Halverson stood at the front, his face pale but stiff. He didn't speak. Darius set his bag down, his fingers brushing the chalk tray. The room buzzed with murmurs, the weight of history pressing down on every desk. Kayla sat in the front row, phone clutched tight, her eyes shining. She whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "Show them." Darius picked up a stick of chalk, turned to the empty board, and for the first time since the day they tried to break him, he prepared to write, not for humiliation, but for redemption. The rain tapped steadily against the classroom windows as Darius stepped to the front of room 2. The same hum of fluorescent lights filled the air. The same chalk dust clung to the tray. The same faint smell of disinfectant lingered. Yet nothing about this moment felt the same. The last time he stood at this board, he had been late, humiliated, told to fail for the amusement of others. Today he was invited back, not as a student being punished, but as a speaker. The desks were filled with familiar faces. Students who had once giggled behind their hands, now sat with notebooks open, pens poised, their eyes fixed on him. Even Riley Hammond, who had once whispered about kids like him, sat in the second row, silent, his jaw tight. The laughter that once echoed in this room had been replaced with stillness, the weight of recognition pressing into every chair. Kayla sat near the front again, phone tucked into her pocket this time. She didn't need to record. She wanted only to watch. And at the back of the room, Dr. Allen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a faint smile of encouragement on his face. Beside him, Principal Behringer looked stiff and uncomfortable, his authority subdued by the storm of public opinion that had forced this gathering into existence. Mr. Halverson stood near his desk, pale and motionless, his lips pressed into a line that looked more like defeat than control. Darius picked up a piece of chalk. Its weight was familiar, grounding. He tapped it once against the board, the sound sharp in the silence. "I was given this board once, as punishment," he began, his voice steady, carrying more strength than the boy who had once whispered answers to himself. "I was told to solve problems meant to humiliate me. Problems I wasn't meant to solve." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Several students shifted uncomfortably. "But here's the thing about problems," He continued, "They don't care who holds the chalk. They don't care what color your skin is. They don't care what people expect from you. Problems yield to logic, to patience, to vision, not to prejudice." He turned and wrote the first line of an equation on the board. Not the same problem as before, but one of his own making. A new challenge, stripped from the pages of his published work. His hand moved with confidence, each stroke deliberate. The room leaned forward. Pens scratched. No one giggled. No one whispered. He explained each step carefully, not rushing. His voice was measured, his logic unfolding with a rhythm that carried both elegance and authority. He wasn't just proving mathematics, he was proving presence, proving belonging, proving that the boy who had once been dismissed had transformed into someone undeniable. Kayla's eyes welled with tears. She remembered the first time she had seen him at this board. Shoulders tense, silence pressing against his back as the room waited for him to collapse. Today the silence was different. It was reverent. Halfway through, he paused and turned back to the class. "I used to think this board was a wall," he said softly. "Something built to keep me out, to remind me of what I wasn't supposed to be. But now I see it differently. It's not a wall, it's a canvas." The words landed heavier than any chalk mark. Even Riley looked down at his notebook, shame flickering across his face. By the time he reached the final line, the board was full again, a cascade of reasoning stitched together with precision. He underlined the solution and set the chalk down gently. The room remained silent for a beat. Then applause erupted, not scattered, not hesitant, applause that shook the desks, applause that filled the space where laughter once lived. Darius didn't smile widely. He only nodded, the calm of someone who knew the weight of the journey it had taken to stand here again. When the clapping quieted, he leaned against the desk, his gaze sweeping across the room. "The first time I stood here, I was told kids like me don't make it to MIT, that we don't belong in these spaces, that our role is to fail, so others can feel smarter. But here's what I want you to remember. His voice softened, but it carried deeper. Brilliance is not the property of a race, or a class, or a neighborhood. It doesn't belong to privilege. It belongs to whoever nurtures it, to whoever refuses to let the world bury it." He let the silence expand, his eyes resting briefly on Halverson, then back to the class. Kayla whispered almost to herself, "Say it," and Darius did. "What if the world," he asked, his voice steady but filled with quiet fire, "stopped underestimating black brilliance?" The question echoed across the room like a bell. Some students wrote it down, word for word. Others only stared, the weight of it too heavy to unpack all at once. At the back of the room, Dr. Allen nodded slowly, his expression proud. Denise, who had slipped quietly into the doorway without Darius noticing, pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. The chalkboard stood full again, no longer a weapon, no longer a stage for humiliation, but a monument. Darius stepped back from the board, his chalk-dusted hands open at his sides. He looked out at the class that had once mocked him, now silent, taking notes, and he left them with the only question that mattered. What if? Stories like Darius's aren't rare, they're just rarely believed. If you think voices like his deserve to be heard, type yes in the comments.